Air pollution. So the first thing I want to say about air pollution is that it's very important on the word that you use, the language that you use for this, the vocabulary that you use, okay? So the idea is that a lot of the times we talk about the greenhouse effect. Now, the greenhouse, as you know, greenhouses are places where you can control a lot of variables. And so the greenhouse effect is basically, it's the idea that heat is trapped within the Earth's atmosphere, and it's due to infrared waves being emitted from the sun and then basically getting trapped within the atmosphere. You don't need to understand the idea. If you know the idea of the long wave and the short wave length IR, that's great, but you don't need to know it. Basically, it's just the idea that heat is trapped within Earth's atmosphere. And this is a natural thing. It's important to understand that the greenhouse effect has actually been going on for millions and millions of years. It's what allows Earth to support life, all right? All right. The problem when we talk about pollution is that it's the gases, there are gases that humans are producing in unnatural quantities or just producing, period, that are unnatural that increase the greenhouse effect. And that is global warming. So global warming is basically an increase in what we call the greenhouse gases, which are the gases that affect that are responsible for this greenhouse effect. So they increase in greenhouse gases due to human activity. And there are several greenhouse gases. So what are they? Let's talk about that. So greenhouse gases include, the big one is CO2, and that is produced in terms of human activity. Of course, there's always respiration, right? All organisms produce some CO2 because they all respire. But in terms of human activities, that is produced by combustion, which is the burning of fossil fuels. So oil, coal, gasoline, petrol, whatever you want to call it. So that's where we're putting it into the air. All right. Other ones are water vapor, actually, is technically a greenhouse gas. Methane is a really big one. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. So even if you have just a little bit, you can see a huge increase in the greenhouse effect on it. And this is produced mainly by cows. Technically, it's the bacteria in the cow's stomachs, and other ruminants, so sheep, goats, things like that, and in rice fields. Right. Another one is nitrous oxide, which is N2O. It's nice. And this is, again, something that mainly humans produce. It's not produced naturally very much. And the other one that humans produce that's not produced naturally are CFCs. They stand for chlorofluorocarbons. They are not around much anymore, and you don't need to know what they stand for. But they used to be used there. You'll find them in old refrigerators and things like that. They were used as coolants, but they were responsible for the hole in the ozone layer, and so they were phased out in the 1980s. All right, this is actually one that we've managed to get rid of. The others have gone up, but so those are your greenhouse gases. All right, and those aren't the only air pollutants that we have. And I'm out of paper, so I have to go get some more, and I will continue this video in a moment. All right. Oh, I realized I didn't say what nitrous oxide is used for or where it comes from. It's actually used as a foamant for things like whipped cream, and it's also used in engines to give them an extra boost. So it's not, you won't find it in like the car that you guys drive around or your parents drive around, hopefully, but you'll find it in like racing cars and things like that. So that's where nitrous oxide comes from. It's produced from combustion of certain things, or you add it. And I've never seen them ask about where it comes from or what it actually does, but you should have it in your list of greenhouse gases. You should definitely know that nitrous oxide is a greenhouse gas. Okay. Now, I said there were other types of gases, air pollution, that were released that also have detrimental effects, even though they may not contribute to the greenhouse effect. All right. And so the first one of these that I want to talk about is sulfur dioxide, and sulfur dioxide is responsible for the formation of acid rain. All right, and acid rain is it can lead to acidification of soil, which can cause leaching of minerals and make it more difficult for plants to grow in the soil. Root hairs become less effective because they need enzymes in order to take up minerals and things like that. So it can also lead to acidification of lakes, which could, of course, damage fish and eggs and, amphibian eggs and things like that. So acid rain, if you can imagine that it would be affected by a change in pH, then acid rain could affect it. So that's one of the others. And then the other one is carbon monoxide. Now, carbon monoxide, some of you may remember from chapter 3. This is, it's carbon monoxide. So instead of CO2, it's just CO. Please make sure that if you use this abbreviation, you are doing so correctly. Anyway, but carbon monoxide is not an air pollutant in that it damages the ecosystem. Instead, what it damages is your lungs. Carbon monoxide binds to hemoglobin, if you remember, because it's also in cigarette smoke, right? So if you remember this from chapter 3, it's the same thing. Carbon monoxide binds to hemoglobin, forming a compound called carboxyhemoglobin. And because it binds to hemoglobin actually tighter than oxygen, it prevents the carrying of oxygen around your body. So it decreases the amount of oxygen available. And I say you, of course, but if it does that to any animal that uses hemoglobin to carry oxygen around. So most animals. So we think about it as a human problem, but of course it's not. If you have a lot of carbon monoxide emissions around any sort of animals, then it will have the same effect on them as it would on humans. So these are the other two that are not global warming, or that aren't greenhouse gases, but they still contribute to air pollution. Now, with the greenhouse effect and with global warming, why do we care? What are possible problems with this? All right, I already said some of the problems with acid rain. Okay, so this is acidification of soil or lakes. All right, with global warming, why is global warming a problem? Heart feels weird that I have to actually say that. Then if they ask about this, of course, you can get polar ice caps melting, which could raise sea levels. So you can get a lot of flooding. Okay. It would change the ocean currents actually, and a lot of the ecosystems that are anywhere near a coast are actually based on the current ocean currents. So if you think about the fact that there's palm trees in, I don't know where palm trees are, other than they're not in southern England, but anyway, we can get them in places. It's because of, for example, the Gulf Stream, which comes up from the Gulf of Mexico and crosses the Atlantic to go into England. So England is actually much warmer, or the British Isles, I should say, are actually much warmer than than the corresponding latitudes. So for example, the parts of Canada that would correspond with where it is on the globe. Sorry if I'm not making sense. And so a change in ocean currents would be a major, major issue. It would also change global rainfall patterns. It wouldn't necessarily lead to a decrease overall in the rainfall, but if you have changes in the global rainfall patterns, you can expect like severe flooding in some parts, you can expect severe droughts in other parts, because the ecosystems that are currently in place around the world, one of the reasons that those ecosystems exist in that location is due to the amount of rain that area normally gets. And so if you change the rainfall patterns, then you could get more flooding as well as more droughts. And this goes into, these are things you should be able to answer. And the idea that global warming in general, one of the big hallmarks of it is that it increases extreme weather events. All right, which is why you get things like really mild winters, but then you also get crazy amounts of snowstorms and stuff like that. That is all due to global warming, and global warming basically causes long-term climate changes in the climate. You would have to, so the problems with this is that, of course, it could lead to extinction or reduction of biodiversity, because if plants or animals cannot change where they live and the temperature changes too much, or the environment changes, or their food sources disappear due to all of these things, then of course they go extinct. So you can get an extinction or a reduction of biodiversity. And of course, you would, and that I could say of biodiversity and ecosystems. Some ecosystems might disappear entirely, others might get smaller, others might just die out because rainforests, for example, have a very delicate balance. If they start losing their rain every day, then that whole ecosystem could collapse. Right. So these are all issues with air pollution.